like without really noticing, we crossed the 1,500 recordings discussed line in last episode.
Unbelievable. And that's not even 1,500 recordings heard, because we've done more than that, but we've only discussed 1,500 recordings.
Yeah, I knew it was coming up soon, but I wasn't keeping track, and there it is. And I did some digging and searching, used AI to help me out as well. This seems to be a world record for music podcasts, as far as I can tell. Now, there are a lot of music review podcasts out there, and many of them have more episodes than we do, but most of them focus on either one song or one recording per episode. I think we're the only ones crazy enough to have shot for 6 recordings in each episode. So if anyone else out there has a claim to more than that, write to us and let us know. Otherwise, you'd better get busy if you want to catch up, because the count will be 1,507 when we finish this episode.
The thing is, like, if we were somehow the record holders, I mean, we're just doing this for fun. Like, some nutcase that wants to have the record could easily pass us, because we're not going to do anything crazy. You know?
We're just going to keep doing what we've been doing.
What was that thing David Lee Roth said about Van Halen? He said, we're not this way because we're in a rock and roll band. We're in a rock and roll band because we are this way.
Right.
Yeah, so we're kind of like that, too.
Yeah. Anyway, this week we're at episode 260 on Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. I'm your co-host, Russ.
And I'm your co-host, Mike. 260, man, we're heading towards 300. Pretty soon we'll have a perfect bowling score.
There you go. And that's all the good news, but this week we've also got some bad news, so I've got to roll over to the piano here. We've lost a couple names here, one in classical and one in jazz.
Yeah, and the one in classical is a pretty big name. This is the English soprano Felicity Lott. Renowned for her radiant interpretations of Mozart and Richard Strauss roles, died on May 15th at the age of 79 after a battle with cancer. She was born into a family of amateur musicians, studied French and Latin, and developed an affinity for French culture and music. And I have a few recordings of her singing French music. It's kind of nice. Now, her stage presence and warm, luminous voice earned her acclaim at leading opera houses worldwide, with signature roles including the Marschallin in Der Rosenkavalier, the Richard Strauss opera, and the Countess in The Marriage of Figaro. So that's also a Kirite Kanoa role, I remember. And performances in the Offenbach operettas. So rest in peace, Felicity Lott.
And on the jazz side, trombonist Ryan Porter passed away on May 16th at the too young age of 46 years old from injuries resulting from a traffic accident that occurred in late April. Porter was born in Los Angeles and was a member of the jazz collective West Coast Get Down with saxophonist Kamasi Washington. Their recording sessions produced quite a few albums, and he continued recording as a leader himself and with Washington, playing on Washington's 2024 recording Fearless Movement. Gone too soon.
All right, well,
with that bad news out of the way, let's move into the good news of this week's music. And we've got a lot of variety in the program here. In the episode description, as always, you'll find links to Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music for all of the recordings we're going to discuss. And at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place on Deezer, CD quality streaming music from France. Now, if you can't see the full description, or if the recording list and links are hard to access wherever you're listening to us now, you can always come over and check us out on our host site. That's Podbean, PODBEAN.com. Everything is easy to follow over there. If you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe wherever you enjoy listening to us, and tell a music-loving friend. Help us grow our audience. If you take a moment to give us a ranking or write a short review, that also helps us get listed in the music category recommendations, and that's another way we can grow our audience. Come and follow us on Facebook as well to get extra info and more new release information throughout the week. You can leave a message or a comment there. Check us out on X. We're Adult Music Pod over there. I also post links to the new episodes there. And if you'd like to contact us directly with any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com. We'll be playing music sample clips as part of our discussion, and this is our fair use disclaimer. Music sample clips are for commentary and educational purposes. We recommend that listeners listen to the complete recordings, all of which are available on streaming services in the links provided. And we also suggest that if you enjoy the music, you consider purchasing the CDs or high-quality downloads to support the artists. And we're going to start in the Baroque this week with a unique recording, Mike.
Yeah, it's unique, but we've actually done this sort of thing before. This is Plucked Bach 3 by Alon Sariel on various mandolins, it says here. I'll tell you what they are when we get to the pieces. And this is on the Pentatone label, released May 8th. Now, we talked about the first album in this series for Bach on various plucked string instruments, which was called Plucked Bach, back on episode 81, Summer Strummin', on September 19th, 2022. Remember 2022? I don't.
A distant memory, yeah.
And we heard Sariel's, of course, Vienna mandolin stories with the Corona Academy, conducted by Michael Alexander Willens on episode 215. Okay, that's more like it. Doorway to the Horizon on June 9th, 2025, so last year. Now, yeah, I had forgotten we had talked about Plucked Bach on episode 81, but of course those were in the good old bad old days when we didn't do any music samples, so this is really the first time you're going to hear some Bach on the mandolin on this podcast, unless you bought that album, of course. Okay, so on this album, Sariel plays the Tuscan mandola, which is tuned an octave lower than the mandolin. He also plays the archlute, the Tuscan mandolin, the mandolin, and the baglama. I hope I said that right. It's got a G with a sort of a squiggly line over it. And that comes from the Ottoman tradition. If you look at the album cover, those instruments are displayed left to right in that order on the album cover, so you can see what they're what they look like. That's a great idea to put them on the album cover like that. You know, you can kind of figure out what they are. Now, the thing is, if you saw this picture and somebody were to say to me, pick out the baglama, I would have no problem doing that. It's one of those things is not like the others type of situations. All right, anyway, let's get on with this program. This is track 1, Violin Sonata number 3 in C major, BWV 1005. Now, this is, of course, the solo violin sonata from the famous set of sonatas and partitas by Bach. Here, played on the archlute, so a pretty big instrument. It's going to have a ringing or sustaining bass. It starts satisfyingly in the low register of the instrument. That's why we want to hear that archlute anyway. Making a cool, reverberating sound. It just kind of continues. It's great. It moves up into the middle range for the melody. I'm going to give you the opening as a sample as well, so you get to hear that great bass on the archlute. Okay, we're just constantly building up tension there, so you got to go and hear that entire track to hear where that winds up. It's really nice to hear these on a chordal instrument like the mandolin because you can hear all the harmony. Sariel plays this with a lingering quality, letting the tones drift off into the ether as if in contemplation. The brief sustain gives the lines less solidity than the violin, and for that reason shows the piece in a new, more intimate light. Yeah, the whole quality of the piece changes from instrument to instrument, and Bach's music sort of survives them all, and even takes on different meanings with the different timbres. There's a great false cadence at 3 minutes and 28 seconds. I am a big fan of the false cadence, which leads to a set of odd chords that eventually bring us to the end of the piece. Yeah, you should listen to this, and you'll know why we consider Bach to be like a musician's musician, because this is the kind of thing that rivets musicians where the harmony is going, and he's just surprising you every step of the way. Even though this piece is 300 years old, it's still comes across with freshness and a real sense of surprise to it. Track 2, the Well-Tempered Clavier, Book 1, Prelude 1 in C major, BWV 1009. You all know this piece. It's played here on the Tuscan mandolin, and it's often the first piece any student plays on the piano. I think it was the first piece I ever played on the piano, unless it was something like, Bobby's New Hat or something like that. This would be the first serious piece I played. Is played here with some ebbing and flowing of tempo, I guess to fill in the space that the instrument leaves. It makes the piece expressive and covers the quick sustain of the mandolin. Yeah, this instrument doesn't sustain for very long, so I guess the speed kind of covers for that. I like the quality of this instrument. It's a Tuscan mandolin. Let's listen and hear what that sounds like. Now, he's kind of cheating a little bit here. He's kind of taking a note away, I think. I remember this because it's sort of like a, Fibonacci numbers. There are 5 notes and then 3 notes. You hear the 5 and then 3. But he's playing 4 notes and then 3. So he seems to be, unless one of them is kind of being covered up, that I'm not hearing. So I think he's maybe adjusted this piece for the instrument a bit. Anyway, we get a new view of a familiar work when it's played on a new instrument here, and this was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Tracks 3 through 8, Cello Suite Number 3 in C Major, BWV 1009, played on the Tuscan mandola. Okay, we're just getting the whole parade of instruments here right away, which is kind of cool. But this is going to be a fully 6-movement work that we're going to hear on the same instrument. So tracks 3 through 8. Track 3 is the prelude, first movement. It has a pleasant quality on the mandola, which is, again, an octave lower than a mandolin. It's arranged without chords, just as it's played on the cello. Sariel's pacing makes the piece breathe nicely. He has similar ebb and flow that he applied to the prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier prelude in the previous track, and he manages to get the false cadence in the last minute to be a genuine surprise via his pacing. Track 4, the second movement, Allemande. Now these are all names of dances from the Baroque era. The quick 16th notes come across cleanly in the opening line, and the piece itself comes across cheerfully. Get a nice little steering away from the cadence there into something new. I like the overall cleanness of tone in the performance. And then we get to track 5, the third movement, Courante, which is a faster dance. Let's just start by hearing that. The The Courant, as it should, comes across with even more brightness of tone and mood than the Allemande did. It's only mildly faster, but feels like it has a lot more energy. Sariel navigates its constant twists and turns admirably. Track 6, the fourth movement, Sarabande. Now, Sariel sets an appropriate pace for this stately Sarabande, and it comes across with a bit of a melting quality to it, though his articulation is so crisp that the piece loses some of the sadness the cello would give it. It does come across with a bit of poignancy via its phrasing, especially after the 2-minute mark. I'll have you sample that one on your own. Track 7, the fifth movement, Bourrée 1 and Bourrée 2. Sariel pulls out the dance quality at the opening. The lines do get a bit more rhetorical as they unspool, making us forget that this is a dance momentarily. But then, once the opening chords sound again, we get a strong sense of the beat. And then finally, track 8, the sixth movement, Gigue, which is, in English, is a jig. The gigue also has a mild dance quality to it and features a rushing line and hard-strummed section at one point. In this performance, the gigue comes across as more complex than I initially thought it was, with Sariel exposing the interconnection between keys and sections exceptionally well. And I can't sample that. You're going to have to hear the whole piece on your own. Track 9, Notebook for Anna Magdalena Bach, 1725. This is the Musette in D major, BWV Anhang 126, attributed to J.S. Bach. It may not be by him, but it is in Anna Magdalena's book. This is played on the Baglama, and when I heard this, I didn't recognize the piece at all, I have to tell you. It really kind of hid the profile that we're all familiar with.
I thought we switched recordings when I got to this one.
Right. The instrument used here has a Middle Eastern, or more accurately Turkish, twanging sound to it. Now, I've heard this instrument played on like Renaissance era albums. It features in Italian works too, because Turkish culture just kind of spread around a bit when the Ottomans were in what is modern day Turkey. So let's hear this, and remember, this is Bach, or maybe it is. I don't know, I kind of feel like if you were to play, like, say, even something as famous as Beethoven's Ode to Joy on this instrument, it would still sound like a Turkish piece. Yeah. It's really funny how this instrument just transforms the piece completely. As played here, the piece sounds more like a spontaneous improvisation than a composed Bach work. It has a strong dance quality to it once it gets going, the figuration swirling by the end. The sound comes as a surprise in the context of what we've previously heard on the album. Track 10, Nicola Matthäus, a composer we heard only a few weeks ago.
That's right.
Yeah, Alia Fantasia in A minor, played on the mandolin. Now, this is the first time we're hearing the mandolin, I believe, on this album.
Yeah, because there's mandolin and Tuscan.
Yeah, they did
mandolin,
the Tuscan mandolin. That doesn't count. So this is the first time we're hearing this particular instrument. And this is all of them now. So after the track 10, we finally got them all in. I kind of feel like it's like in an Indian rag. You know, they have the alap section where they gradually play all the notes just to kind of introduce them all, right. Sort of. I feel like this is sort of a version of that. We're hearing all the different sounds that the instruments make. Anyway, Matthäus' piece has a Bach prelude in C major quality to it in its pattern circling back on itself to construct the piece. Let's hear this. Yeah, some good harmony in that one, too. These Baroque people really had an advanced sense of harmony. There's a lot of room sound on the mandolin on this track, and this helps the very high notes on the instrument ring out, low on sustain as they are. It's an attractive piece, as you heard, and all of its parts are clearly distinguishable on the mandolin. Okay, tracks 11 through 14, we get Violin Partita number 2 in D minor, BWV 1004, and this is played on the Tuscan mandolin. Okay, now, if you know your Bach sonatas and partitas, you know that Partita number 2 is the one with the great chaconne at the end. But we'll get to that. We're going to hear it on this album, but there's an interesting programming thing that's done. Anyway, track 11 is the first movement Allemande. The Tuscan mandolin really isn't much different in sound than the mandolin we heard on the previous track. I'd say the higher notes have a bit more sustaining power. This piece shows those high notes off rather well. Sariel's crisp attack on the strings allows each line to leap out at the listener, and I like the way this quality draws attention to Bach's multiple parts within a single line quality. Chords are gently introduced into the piece on the repeat, filling out some of the harmony. The piece, of course, goes into a B section, which is also repeated. Track 12, the second movement, Courante. I like the sound of the attack on this highly articulated opening line. Alright, so this instrument seems to have a bit of a darker bottom end than the mandolin does. It's a little heavier, I guess, too. The piece comes across well on this instrument, and the work has an ebbing and flowing quality that Sariel really applies quite a few times on this album. He draws it out here with some subtlety, especially in the B section of the movement. Track 13 is the third movement, Sarabande. Again, I feel like the Sarabande in this set is played at slightly too fast a tempo to register as it should, but it's the lack of overall sustain on the instrument that probably makes the tempo necessary. Also, it's got a completely different quality on the Tuscan mandolin than it would on the violin anyway, so it's almost like a new piece. Anyway, let's hear it so you can hear a little bit of what I'm talking about and compare it to your memories of the solo violin work. Yeah, some nice subtlety on the very pianissimo tone at the end of that line, too. I like the added harmony, or at least the sustained harmony under the melody, that we get on the mandolin here. The piece has some attractive turns of phrase that show up more clearly at the slightly faster tempo. The B section is a bit knottier harmonically, but comes across well. That's really often the case in Bach. The B section is more harmonically knotty. He has to get back to the tonic he started in and sometimes takes some pretty wild detours to get there. It's easy to follow the harmony, though, in this piece, as played on this instrument, the Tuscan mandolin. Track 14 is the fourth movement, Gigue. This is taken at a slowish tempo, but with the sense of the dance registering. There are some quick passages that come in as the piece gets going, and each note is articulated strongly. I like the changing figuration of this work within the 6/8 rhythm. It should be sampled in full, so I'm going to leave you to do that on your own. And now, we're expecting the chaconne, right? Well, we're going to hear that on track 16 on a different instrument. That'll be on the mandolin, not on the Tuscan mandolin. Now, Sariel explains in his booklet notes that the chaconne is a monumental movement that is often seen as a tombeau for Bach's first wife, Maria Barbara, who died shortly before the chaconne was conceived. Bach was in Karlsbad with his employer, Prince Leopold of Anhalt-Köthen, and when they arrived back in Köthen, Bach was devastated to learn of his wife's sudden death. Now, as I get older now, I kind of think, man, that must really be devastating. You go on a trip, you come home,
Yeah.
your wife is dead. You don't even know about it. That'd be really strange. It can't really happen to us today because you'd get like a message probably.
Right.
So very different times. He did not have the chance to farewell Maria Barbara, using farewell here as a verb, I think, in the booklet note. Not even to be present at her burial. So she was just dead and buried by the time he got home. This context made Sariel want to include the next piece on the album, and that is track 15, Johann Paul von Westhof's Violin Sonata No. 3 in D minor, third movement, Imitazione delle Campane, which means imitation of bells. And this is played on the mandolin. Tombeau movements often carried a dedication in their title and were mostly written for the lute or the harpsichord. Sometimes we find imitations of church bells which come to symbolize the funeral of a beloved person and their ascension to the next world. So just before the chaconne, Sariel chose to interrupt the partita and allow Westhof's bells, sounding here for the first time through the strings of a mandolin, set the ground for the longest tombeau in the whole Baroque era, which is going to be the chaconne. Let's hear a bit of Westhof's imitation of bells. Now, I don't know if that comes across as a bell sound, but it is impressive. Basically, the piece comes across as a set of arpeggiated chords, like many similar Bach works, such as the C major prelude we heard earlier. And really, at that rapid pace, it kind of reminds me of the opening of the Arvo Pärt piece, Fratres, for violin and piano, where the violin has that rapid arpeggiated figure that changes chords all the time. It kind of put me in mind of that, so really from the Baroque into the contemporary era. All right, track 16, here we go. Strap in. Violin Partita No. 2 in D minor, BWV 1004, fifth movement chaconne of the Violin Partita No. 2, played on the mandolin. The mighty chaconne always stands out when it's played due to its weightiness as well as its length. It's almost 15 minutes here. It comes across with great depth and weight when played on the violin, but not so much on the mandolin. But that's okay, because the mandolin exposes other elements of the score. Sariel takes the opening at a quicker tempo, holding the line together. At this speed, we're hearing more of the construction of the work, how it's held together. Let's hear the opening. I very much like the subtle change to the next theme after the opening. In fact, Sariel is subtle with these alterations to the theme throughout the movement. At 3 minutes, Sariel goes for a more sharply articulated attack and an interestingly thinner sound, which caught my ear. The sound goes back to something full after this brief section. Sariel is pretty subtle with the way he changes tone and dynamic in each variation. This is a really intriguing performance that etches the work and its progression in the mind. At 4 minutes and 55 seconds, he uses a similar technique to the previous rapidly arpeggiated piece, Westhof's third violin sonata movement with the imitation of bells. After a few sections with this constantly moving technique, a more still-sounding section comes in at 7 minutes. Then the opening theme is repeated in a higher range. So it's just kind of like a division point, like the midway through the work. So he reminds us of the opening theme here. After this, Sariel still manages to pull new tricks out of his bag of articulation to make new sections of the work stand out, including a hard plucked section after the 9-minute mark, followed by a muted tone at the 10-minute mark, and an appealingly gentle heavenly tone high on the instrument at the 11-minute mark. The theme returns at the end, and the journey is over, but there's one last piece. Track 17. Cello Suite No. 4 in E-flat major, BWV 1010, the fourth movement, Sarabande, and this is played on the arch lute, the instrument we began the entire program with on track 1. The heavenly music presented in this piece was programmed here to symbolize the afterlife of Anna Magdalena, who was Bach's second wife after Maria Barbara, and of Johann Sebastian himself. Here we get the more resonant arch lute playing the piece, and that heavier bottom end comes across as reassuring after the mandolin's tone for 15 minutes in the chaconne. Let's hear it. Yeah, it kind of brings us back to earth after we were so high up in that weightless kind of higher sounding instrument. Heavenly this work may be, but I find it more reassuring, applying it to my mind to more worldly concerns, or a lightness with those concerns. I liked the way the end of the album, from the violin partita on, comes across as a whole in Sariel's performance and programming. In fact, this is really an excellently programmed album, especially at the end. I enjoyed Alon Sariel's previous 2 Bach mandolin albums, one of which we discussed on an earlier podcast, and this one I feel ups the ante a bit by including the violin chaconne and the sarabande from the 4th cello suite. The program from that point on gains a bit of weightiness and forms an overall suite of its own. Sariel brings off the chaconne itself well, with a variety of attacks and creative approaches that keep the work engaging on the mandolin for its entire length. The first half of the program features the 3rd cello suite, which comes across with some cheerful brightness before the weightiness of the later half of the album. So overall, the album is a program divided between happiness and sorrow, and healing at the end. It's probably the most impressive of Sariel's 3 Bach releases. It left me in a contemplative mood, and I'd recommend hearing it for its creative playing and program. And I'd also recommend hearing it from beginning to end without stopping. It's a pretty long album, but you can do it.
This was interesting for experiencing Bach in new ways, much like the first volume that we heard. First of all, as the title indicates, it's Plucked Bach. So you're hearing bowed works for violin and cello on the plucked selection of instruments here that transforms these works, even if you're familiar with the melodies and the harmonies. The articulation, sustain, and phrasing are all different. The well-tempered clavier work is unique too, but not as transformed. Secondly, Sariel's choice and range of instruments brings a lot of tonal variety, from the arch lute to the different mandolins, and the mandola for the cello pieces worked really nicely. The performances are interpreted uniquely too, with the music kind of dripping out of the instruments at the start of the program, and more intensity coming along later. There are surprises too. The ringing strings of the baglama on Notebook for Anna Magdalena Bach really stood out. And the emotional performance on violin partita No. 2, Chaconne, was a real highlight for me. Great technical ability and overall musicality by Sariel straight through the recording.
Yeah, I agree. And now that you mentioned the baglama, I'm kind of sorry that we only heard it on one track. You'd think they'd use it on maybe 1 or 2 others as well. Yeah. It was an interesting sounding instrument. I'd like to hear kind of it applied to other works and see how they sound with that. Something familiar so I could follow it.
It might start to sound like a Constantinople album then, though.
Oh, that could be cool. Yeah, we're funny. We're doing a lot of crossover classical this year, too.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. All right, next, as is so often the case on this podcast, and I got to do this a little less, we are leaping over the entire classical and romantic era and heading squarely into the post-war 20th century. We're going to hear works by Witold Lutosławski, Concerto for Cello, Concerto for Orchestra, and a piece by Ernest Bloch called Schelomo. This is played by the cellist Jean-Guihen Queyras and the Luxembourg Philharmonic, conducted by Gustavo Gimeno. Now, we've heard him conduct on this podcast before. This is on the Harmonia Mundi label, released on May 15th. Now, Lutosławski was born in Warsaw on 1913, and he survived and was scarred by the upheavals of early 20th century Poland. Now, if you're wondering why a lot of post-war music sounds the way it does, Lutosławski's work is one of the reasons why. His father was executed by Bolsheviks, and he endured the Nazi occupation, so he was getting it from both sides really here. The Warsaw Uprising and the pressures of Stalinism. From these experiences came his belief in art as a search for perfection absent in reality. And I think, Russ, you and I may have grown up with our teachers kind of like giving us this idea about art too, because I think they were influenced by the war. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of that in the air at the time. Okay, now tracks 1 through 3, Lutosławski's Concerto for Orchestra. Now, this was kind of a bold thing to write because the really famous Concerto for Orchestra was the one by Bartók, and that was the only one there ever was until this one. And now there are a lot more. A lot of Americans have written concertos for orchestra now, including Jennifer Higdon and Christopher Rouse. Now, the Concerto for Orchestra here ends the first phase of Lutosławski's search for perfection and points towards the modernist turn his music would take in the mid-1950s until his death in 1994. And I remember that, too, because that was the year I came to Japan. One of the first pieces of news I got here was Lutosławski's death. The piece is full of orchestral imagination, expressive power, and folk motifs, but there's a darker subtext that likely escaped the ears of the Soviet censors. Beneath its socialist realism lie grittier truths. Socialist realist ideals included folk elements, driving energy, accessibility, a journey from darkness to light. This piece's sophistication pushes past the acceptable level of formalism, and what formalism is musical complexity. Anything that's really complicated was labeled formalist by the Soviet authorities. That's what that word means. So this work was too complicated for the time. They wouldn't allow that, you know. Like Bartók's Concerto for Orchestra, Lutosławski treats orchestral sections as characters in dialogue, seeking answers to urgent questions. Track 1, the first movement, Itrada, Allegro Maestoso. The piece begins with Struggle, which is answered by a song of hope from the horn, that's the French horn. The opening is dramatically ominous, and the cello section of the orchestra are in right away. The opening sounds like a march, so Itrada, an entrance, is a good title here. Let's hear that song of hope in the horn, though. We all need a bit of hope these days. Let's hear how Lutosławski shaped this in his piece. So that hope is not characteristic of the movement. The movement is dark on the whole. The strings come in, they bring drama and urgency back to the music. I like the sudden rhythm change in the bass at around the 2-minute and 40-second mark. Lutosławski also is a great orchestrator. If you listen beyond the foreground, there are all sorts of intriguing orchestral colors. Spectacular splash of the gong with timpani registering strongly at the 4-minute mark is an example. There's finally a moment of calm at the 4-minute and 50-second mark, with woodwinds playing in the piano or mezzo-piano dynamic range. There's a kind of calm, forest-like atmosphere to this section of the work, which belongs to the woodwinds. The section ends the movement on a quiet, ethereal string chord. Track 2, the second movement, Capriccio Notturno e Ariosto. This is marked vivace. The glittering textures of the opening are interrupted by a trumpet outburst that drags the music into darkness. So rude brass interruptions recur in later works of Lutosławski's, including the cello concerto, which we'll hear later. The opening is skittish, like a nervous Midsummer Night's Dream overture a la Mendelssohn. All of the opening moves lightly, almost gliding by. And that's a great example of some of the fantastic orchestration that Lutosławski brings to the piece. There's a weightless feeling to the vibratoless modal string line there, making the piece feel free. The brass interrupt rather spectacularly with a bold fanfare at 2 minutes and 40 seconds. There's great sound on the brass, too. They fade away, and we're left with quick spiraling patterns trying to rise up again. This is part of where the concerto for orchestra idea comes in, with the virtuosic spiraling violin lines and the quick pizzicati that follow at the 5-minute mark. The movement ends on light percussive qualities. Track 3, the third movement, Passacaglia, toccata and chorale, andante con moto to allegro giusto. Now this builds from solemn plucked bass lines, that is the Passacaglia theme, passacaglias are built on a repeating bass line, to a radiant chorale at the end, a daring suggestion of spirituality at a time when public expressions of faith were problematic. I like that word problematic. They were forbidden, really. Okay? A grotesque dance intrudes before the chorale returns, transfigured after coursing developments. The bass Passacaglia theme is very slow, in complete polar opposite contrast to the previous movement. It's almost more felt than heard, played pianissimo as it is, and it's the bass quality that gets to your body more than your ears. The rest of the orchestra starts out in the low end, first with brief figures. The oboe plays a modal melody, sounding almost Middle Eastern in its slitheriness. The music gradually crescendos, not in a hurry to reach any goal. The wind suddenly takes off at around the 2 minute and 55-second mark. This activity morphs into repeating patterns and rapidly repeated notes in the brass. The music now sounds urgent. The section crashes to an end, and at 5 minutes and 30 seconds, the bass line is in the high harmonic strings, brushed out gently. There's a pause, and at 6 minutes and 18 seconds, a new tentative rushing approach starts, and I'm going to grab a bit of that. Yeah, now in that sample, you're hearing real urgency. Actually, this is the section that follows what I had spoken about earlier. The music here grows bold, and again, we get that vivid brass sound. I finally got some of the brass into a sample. I probably should have done some earlier, too. They rush under an urgent-sounding string line. A dramatic line takes some time to grow by the 8 minute and 20-second mark, and then a downward brass line takes over, playing an urgent line that then heads into the higher end. The section ends at 9 minutes and 20 seconds, and a gentler modal wind theme comes in with flute responding to the initial harmonized line. There's really some compelling orchestration in this section, and really throughout the work. And the section is made even more attractive to me due to its modal harmony. This is after the 9 minute and 20-second mark. A rather chirpy wind theme emerges at around the 11 minute and 30-second mark. A rather playful pizzicato section occurs at around 12 minutes. This builds into brass, as winds so often do in this work. They reach a brass trill, which sounds amazingly tight, considering that it's a trill. A quick leaping dotted rhythm comes in at the 15 minute and 50-second mark in the strings. The music decrescendos and then does an unstoppable sounding Hollywood-type crescendo. If you've seen movies where this big overwhelming crescendo comes in. It sort of has that quality. And it ends on trilling accompaniment for the brass to play over. A quick section breaks out right at the end, allowing the piece to end effervescently. This is a work worth your time, people. If you like the Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, you really should hear this one too. It's pretty spectacular. And it's really well recorded here, and Gimeno really draws some really powerful sounds out of the orchestra. Track 4 through 6, Ernest Bloch, Schelomo, Rhapsody Hébraïque, or Hebrew Rhapsody for cello and orchestra. So we get the cellist in here, Jean-Guihen Queyras. This piece was composed in 1916, and it's the best-known piece in Bloch's series exploring the Jewish soul, that's in quotation marks. The title Rhapsody conjures both the musical genre of a freely structured work, but also the rhapsodist and singer of tales. The music conjures sensuality and spirituality to represent King Solomon. Track 4, the first movement, Lento Moderato, introduces Solomon's meditations. The cello is the first thing you hear. It starts high and takes a satisfying dip into its low end. There's a Middle Eastern modal sound to the melody in the melodic element of the piece. The cello gets a lot of unaccompanied solo time up to the 2-minute mark. In fact, if you like the cello, this really is a real showcase for it. It's solo for about 2 minutes. Yeah, some weepy, moaning sounds from the cello, too, with those light glissandos going downwards. The movement tends to stick to prayer-like repeating figures, with the cello occasionally moving into figuration. Its ritual quality is discernible in the repeating melodic lines, mostly in the cello. In this performance, Queyras gets a fantastic singing tone, making the music resonate deeply. By the 7-minute mark, the orchestration reaches peak opacity and dynamic level, and continues like that before dying down at the 8-minute mark for one last statement by the cello to end the movement. Track 5 is the second movement, Allegro Moderato. This is turbulent and sets cello declamations against orchestral alternatives, partly developed from fragments of Jewish melodies. The clarinet starts this off, followed by bassoon over a bed of shimmering strings. Modal harmonies continue. The cello eventually comes in with the thematic material around the 1 minute and 30-second mark. I really like that the cello just uses its whole range there on that one line. The music grows more agitated as the cello reaches into its higher range afterwards for melodic material, and the orchestra takes over for the end of the movement, which connects to the final movement, and that is Andante Moderato, track 6, the third movement. A contemplation with new material offering for Bloch, a vision of a better world. The cello rises from the depths of its range after an intriguingly harsh but clean-textured brief wind chord. The melody is played slowly and prayerfully here. Sweet-sounding strings are in at 3 minutes to accompany the next cello line, playing in the instrument's high range. Suddenly, at 4 minutes, a distant light brass fanfare is heard. Winds come in and encourage the cello, who takes up the line. big, bold statement by the orchestra on that line. It leads the music to that orchestral peak, and the dynamics die down. At the 6 minute and 30-second mark, the cello is back in modest prayer mode, using its whole range and leading the movement and piece to a tranquil ending. Tracks 7 through 10, Witold Lutosławski's Concerto for Cello and Orchestra, composed in 1970. The work is one of conflict between cello and orchestra, but Lutosławski warned that the conflict shouldn't be interpreted as allegory, where, for example, the cello is the citizen and the orchestra is the state. Mstislav Rostropovich, who played the work's premiere, did interpret it that way, and the brass seemed to be some kind of harsh authority figure in the piece. That's cool, though. You get to be the bad guy. It's always the best role in a movie, right? So brass is the bad guy. That's kind of cool. Anyway, track 7, the first movement, Introduction. The introduction has a pulsing staccato repeating note, followed by a tremor, played by a repeated bow stroke. It's a pretty unique opening, and is played by solo cello without accompaniment. It's also very expressive in tone, Queyras pouring a lot into expression of his part. Even the glissandos seem to sigh. There really are some intriguing sounds from this, including a line with staccato notes, followed by a staccato harmonic. Now I'm hearing Queyras on this album as a really emotive player, especially in the previous Schelomo, and we're hearing more of that here in this Lutosławski cello concerto. Now the music itself, played by the solo cello, is light-toned here and rather spacious, consisting mostly of gestures. That staccato followed by harmonic becomes piano, followed by forte. Then a kind of thrumming effect is created by the bow at around the 4 minute and 15-second mark. More screechy harmonics, and suddenly at the 4 minute and 30-second mark, a trumpet is heard, rather a surprise after 4 minutes and 30 seconds full of solo cello. At the 5 minute mark, the cello stops playing for the first time, and trumpets take over with various fanfaric lines. They stop after an unresolved set of phrases, and that's the movement. Track 8, the second movement, is called 4 Episodes, and that is indeed what you get. The solo cello starts this off too with a gauzier tone. The orchestral accompaniment is light and pointillistic. The interplay between the brass and cello in this movement is pretty interesting, the brass often matching the cello's manner and tone. After a brass interruption, the cello plays plucked chord patterns at 2 minutes and 10 seconds or so, then starts a rhythmic figure on a repeating note. This is the second episode. Patterns seem to last for brief durations. At 3 minutes and 55 seconds, the brass start the third episode, I think. The cello responds with quiet pizzicati that wander around the instrument's lower end. Again, good orchestration in the matching between cello and piano style and sound at around the 4 minute and 20-second mark. The piano figures a bit more here. Let's hear a bit of this. At 5 minutes and 38 seconds, the cello begins the fourth episode, which features swirling figures from the orchestra on occasion, and the cello sawing staccato at chords, though quickly changing patterns. The brass are there again with a minimal-sounding repeating set of figures, all playing at an individual rhythm. The movement ends on a plucked bass note on the cello. Track 9, the third movement, Cantilena. This is a lament that builds into a whirling Totentanz, or dance of death. The cantilena begins with the same repeated staccato note we heard in the previous movement. The cello starts examining a single repeated pizzicato and then goes into a legato line. The cello plays a legato line over ghostly accompaniment. The music builds in intensity, then falls into some haunting orchestration. The cello moves into its higher ends with a legato line, accompanied by searing cellos in the orchestra playing a unison line. It does an accelerando and bursts into the final movement, which is the fourth movement finale, track 10. The cello starts boldly thumbing its nose at its opponents. Conflict rages, leading to the catastrophic climax. At the close, the cello rises up as if to escape, fulfilling the implications of the opening of the movement, but in isolation, alone again. The movement starts with brass cacophony, followed by wind cacophony. It's got some movement and intensity to it. Strings screech out similar lines. Things sound histrionic. At the 1 minute and 12-second mark, there's even a sudden xylophone, which sounds amplified. The cello finally makes a statement at 1 minute and 35 seconds, much more calm than the histrionic orchestra. The cello starts an unspooling line that travels across its range. There are some cello acrobatics in this movement, and it's remarkable how much space the cello is given throughout this concerto. It often plays absolutely unaccompanied, or else with sparse orchestration. Let's hear some of the remarkable double stopping and bowing. And also some interesting orchestration there with those swooping kind of string sounds. Droopy glissandi follow this sample on the cello. Double stopping and rhythmic bowing follow. Again, remarkable playing by Queyras, who's really spectacular on this album. The orchestra make an ominous statement with a long-held sustained chord, after which the cello moans via short glissandi. It sounds like a dog whimpering. A bass sustains a very low note below the cello's frantically played single repeating high note, and the concerto ends there. Lutosławski's music is not hard on the ear, but it is pretty dense and therefore a bit hard on the intellect, so this might not be an album you'll want to hear all the way through in one sitting. The cello concerto that ends the album is pretty intense, but each gesture seems to have a spotlight on it. Every sound draws the attention due to the foregrounding of each gesture, both in cello and the orchestra. It's a remarkable piece, as is the Concerto for Orchestra, which also features disruptive brass. The third movement, Passacaglia, of that work is remarkable, and is a reason to hear the work. Ernest Bloch's Schelomo comes across as ritualistic and spiritual, with its modal character and the solo cello falling into folk melodies, this time of Jewish origin. The cellist has to be up to the task in these works, especially in the Lutosławski concerto, and Jean-Guihen Queyras remains magnetic throughout, meeting all the work's substantial demands, and yet coming across with a sense of supreme musicality and real feeling and passion, too. These really are solid performances of these works, and the two with Queyras playing on them are especially noteworthy. Queyras makes his part sing in both works despite the difficulty of the material. This is a great place to start in order to get into the music of one of the late 20th century's greatest composers.
Lutosławski's Concerto for Orchestra is mercurial with interesting orchestration. In the first movement, there are big brass sections and some short, folky themes of melody. Things are constantly changing. I like the trumpet fanfares in the second movement. In the third movement, after 8 minutes, there's an interesting martial procession that kind of peters out, and then there's that dense kind of brass chorale. At around 13 minutes, there's a big build-up of animated orchestral sections with a big finish with huge bass drum hits. The sounds and orchestration aren't unusual, but the work as a whole is a challenge to navigate in your mind. I'll have to hear this a few more times to make a map of it in my mind. The Concerto for Cello had unique techniques for the bow and covers the full range of the instrument, including almost a walking bass idea in there. The final movement is intense, almost disturbingly so.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was my first time hearing the Bloch work. The cello writing and playing were appealing with the exotic Middle Eastern scales in the second movement and the sad and weeping lines in the third movement. It's very much a dialogue with the orchestra, though, and the orchestral scoring is quite interesting, too. Overall, it's very moody work, but I enjoyed the performances here by Queyras and the Luxembourg Philharmonic a lot, and the sound on the recording is excellent.
Yeah, fantastic sound. This is another reason to get this recording. Also, I want to say about the cello and orchestra. Now, I mentioned that Rostropovich made a really famous recording of this work, which I have in my collection, and it's a great performance. But his interpretation really is like the human against the inhumanity of the orchestral state, and that's not what Lutosławski wanted. And I think that Queyras is kind of more in line with Lutosławski's vision here.
Interesting.
Although Rostropovich gives one of the great performances of this work. Interpretationally, I think, though, that, maybe he doesn't get the intensity that Rostropovich gets, although he does get a lot of intensity. But this might be more in line with what Lutosławski was looking for. I think Lutosławski was looking more for like that Beethoven idea of the the individual standing against the mass or something like that. All right, our contemporary music for the week. Osvaldo Golijov and Pēteris Vasks, a composer we've heard before, an album called Encounter, and that title will come from the Vasks work, the last movement of his piece that we'll hear, his string quartet. This is by the Arethusa Quartet. They're a Netherlands-based string quartet formed in 2023. And they consist of Daniel Roland on violin, Floor Lecoultre on violin, sorry for any Dutch mispronunciations here, Dana Zemtsov on viola, and Maya Bogdanovic on cello. The album also figures in the Golijov work, Chen Halevi on clarinet. And this is released on the Challenge Classics label on May 1st. Now, violinist Daniel Roland says of the album, Encounter is many things at once, an encounter between composers and performers, between past and present, between different traditions and belief systems, and between human vulnerability and transcendence. This spirit of shared humanity feels at the core of these deeply personal pieces. Our first work is Osvaldo Golijov's The Dreams and Prayers of Isaac the Blind, composed in 1994. Now, Golijov was born in La Plata, Argentina, to Eastern European Jewish parents. So both of those elements are going to be really important in his body of work. He's Argentinian and he's also Jewish, and both of those elements come out very strongly. He was born in 1960, and this work has deep roots in Jewish mysticism and klezmer tradition. And you didn't need to be told that after hearing this work. Because the klezmer element is very, very strong. You'll hear it a lot. It has a unique fusion of spirituality and raw human expression. No, that's also true, too. It's a work with ecstatic energy. Isaac the Blind, or Yitzhak Sagi Nahor, again, I hope I pronounced that close to being correct, was the great visionary of early Kabbalah in the 12th and 13th century. The work is based on 3 states of seeking the beyond: dreams, prayers, and blindness, understood in the most spiritual sense. This is called a work of memory, transcendence, and truth. Track 1 is the prelude. This is not a numbered movement. That starts with track 2. This is just called the prelude, and it's marked calmo and sospeso, or suspended. The piece begins with a serene, sustained chord with some wave-like vibrato. It's actually rather intimate. The clarinet is in after the 30-second mark. Oh, I should mention, this is the work with Chen Halevi on clarinet on it. The clarinet is in after the 30-second mark, deep in its low end. Right away, that makes it appealing to me. All right, calm, appealing. But don't worry, it's not going to stay calm for long. This movement crescendos very slowly, and I like the way the clarinet will blend with the strings and then suddenly expose itself via a crescendo or rising line. I also like the way it spends so much time suspending notes in the lower reedy end of the instrument. In fact, when I was hearing this, I was wondering if it wasn't a bass clarinet or at least a bassy clarinet, because it goes so low. I'm really not up on my clarinet range, you'll have to forgive me, but the notes say that it's just a regular clarinet. At 2 minutes and 27 seconds, we get a very high leap in the clarinet to its upper range, playing a figure that sounds like it's from folk music. It's modal, and this whole prelude is pretty brief at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. On track 2, we get to the first movement, the one that's marked as the first movement, agitato, con fuoco, maestoso, and senza misura oscillante. Those are all of the dynamic markings in the piece, or tempo markings. All right, so an aggressive line bursts out of the string quartet with sustained tones continuing in the background. The quartet starts a rhythmic pattern that the clarinet sustains long tones over. I'm starting to hear a little bit of that Jewish folk element in the clarinet line as well, even in its sound. The string quartet kind of reminded me a bit of Steve Reich there, with that chugging rhythm. By around the 50-second mark, the clarinet bursts into modal folk-like lines again, really a klezmer-type melody. That'll build up more, and the klezmer influence was going to be very strong very soon. It plays staccato and gets a lot of intriguing shadings of tone. The rhythm changes at 2 minutes and 30 seconds to something rougher, and then to a smoother sound. At the 3-minute mark, the clarinet is in with a poignant theme over gentle accompaniment from the quartet. The rhythm gets complex, changing only halfway at 4 minutes and 30 seconds. This results in a honking sound from the clarinet, again having a klezmer feel to it. By the 5-minute mark, the movement has the feel and sound of a wild dance. At the 5-minute and 35-second mark, it starts an even faster chugging figure. There's a spectacular low note on the clarinet at 6 minutes that really vibrates the chest cavity. It came as a surprise. These low notes come across as powerfully resonant on the clarinet. The movement suddenly quietens, and the clarinet ends it with a meditation in its low range. Track 3 is the second movement, marked teneramente to ruvido to presto. The second movement here starts quietly and mysteriously with soft staccato chords and one wispy sul ponticello line. The clarinet comes in and plays a slow Jewish song-like melody. Yeah, so pretty intriguing playing from the clarinet all around, with Halevi always manipulating his tone for like maximum passion and sort of involvement in the sound. Halevi puts the character of the line across with a fully idiomatic feeling for it. The clarinet keeps playing that line as the strings glitter and play in harmonics or with a light bow touch. At 3 minutes and 48 seconds, the movement suddenly bursts out fortissimo into a crazed klezmer dance rhythm and melody. It speeds up as it goes. There's an odd hiccup in the clarinet at 5 minutes and 30 seconds that leads to a more tranquil section. In fact, the sounds Halevi gets out of the instrument during the duration of this work are pretty surprising and spectacular. The work is worth hearing for his playing and tonal manipulation alone. By the 7 minute and 24 second mark, a new klezmer-like theme starts emerging without the rhythm, just the melodic shape. There are brief passages followed by pauses, then a rhythmic passage played slowly at 8 minutes and 33 seconds gradually speeds up and suddenly bursts out into another crazed klezmer dance at 8 minutes and 50 seconds. It suddenly cuts off at 10 minutes and 30 seconds, and the music quietens and returns to the tentative sounds of the beginning of the movement. There's a pause, and a fluttering forte line leads to the movement's end. Track 4 is the third movement, Calmo Sospeso, moving to Allegro Pesante. Very quiet string lines played in harmonics open the movement. The clarinet takes the lead in this movement, starting in its low end and rising higher. The clarinet disappears in the strings diminuendo. They play crystalline sounds as the clarinet returns with a quiet folk-like theme at 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The clarinet then bursts out into an impassioned modal theme. The rhythm picks up as if by magic, and the clarinet plays, then suddenly stops at 5 minutes and 30 seconds. The strings play a glittering line produced by light bowing at the 6 minute mark as the clarinet comes back in with a modal folk melody. A crescendo has the strings building in passion. It all becomes like a screeching engine as repetitions of a chord are sawed out to the end of the movement. And track 5 is the postlude. This is not a numbered movement. It's marked lento and liberamente, and it starts with the clarinet playing over glittering strings. You may have to put on the headphones to hear the string quartet in that. Golijov composes modally throughout the piece, and this movement features modal writing too. The clarinet is back in its low end towards the end of this tranquil movement, and, along with the strings, it suddenly disappears, ending the piece. Track 6 through 9, if you thought that piece was intense, we have another one. These are both very expressive works. This is by Pēteris Vasks, who we featured on the podcast before. He's a Latvian composer born in 1946, and this is his String Quartet No. 6, composed in 2019. It's a personal, emotionally charged work. It's a profound meditation on life, memory, death, and transcendence. So this work, as well as the entire album, has a deeply spiritual theme to it. The four movements' titles suggest a life's trajectory. Track 6 is the first movement, Canto 1, Farewell, Andante con passione. The fortissimo gestures alternating with intimate cantabile passages establish the tension between public proclamation and inward reflection. This starts off with some impassioned chords that quickly die down to a quieter dynamic. A more somber melody plays out with the first violin in a stratospheric harmonic range providing atmosphere. It then joins in with the rest of the quartet with more moving earthbound harmony. By 2 minutes and 30 seconds, the strings arouse themselves to a passionate level again. Then the somber music is back to bring this fairly brief movement, less than 4 minutes, to an end, though the last chord drifts off inconclusively. Track 7, the second movement, Looking Back, Allegro appassionato. Now I should mention the booklet misprints the track numbers for the last 3 movements as all the 7th track, but each of these movements does indeed have its own track, at least it does on Deezer. So it is track 6 through 9. Now this movement, the second movement, track 7, forms the emotional and structural core of the work. It revisits life in all of its contradictions, love and loss, tenderness and violence, memory and regret. Vasks introduces what he has called the monster, dark, destructive forces that interrupt moments of lyrical beauty. Don't you hate when that happens? Song repeatedly attempts to rise above chaos only to be threatened again. And echoes of Beethoven also appear. Let's hear the opening of this movement. The opening is agitated, featuring a lot of movement in the individual strings. By the 2-minute mark, the music has decrescendoed to a softer dynamic and a softer attack. It's gentle for a while, then at 3 minutes and 9 seconds, more aggressive lines suddenly burst out, and the agitation of the opening of the movement returns. Some sort of impassioned calm arrives at the 5-minute mark. There's a slight edge to the appealing chords. At the 5-minute and 40-second mark, polyphonic material starts and winds its way to a buildup of tension up to the 6-minute and 44-second mark, where it suddenly melts into an impassioned plea. It's a moving gesture. There's another buildup to a higher range at around the 8-minute and 45-second mark. The music arrives at a calm chord in that range. Tremolo bowing accompanies a further rise upward until the music reaches its goal at just before the 10-minute mark, playing a melody in that new key afterwards. From there, the music moves downwards and ends emphatically. Track 8, the third movement, Canto 2, Leaving, Andante cantabile. The work's most tender and devastating moment. It unfolds as a gradually intensifying song. Near the end, 3 stark cries mark the moment of death, followed by emotionally neutral chords, which Vasks has compared to the sound of a hospital monitor after life has ended. Oh, man. From the beginning, we could already hear traces of Beethoven's Heiliger Dankgesang, or Song of Thanksgiving, from his Opus 132 quartet. Let's hear the opening of this work, not the Beethoven yet. We'll get to that later. Okay, so a calm beginning to the movement. The movement keeps this calm throughout the first 2 minutes, then starts a buildup of dynamic and harmonic tension as the music reaches upward into the instrument's stratospheric ranges. It ends with a repeated chord played in the piano dynamic range. Track 9, the fourth movement, chorale and counter, adagio and molto adagio, and this movement is where the album gets its name from. Here, Vasks brings us face to face with Beethoven through the chorale of the Heiliger Dankgesang from his Opus 132 string quartet in A minor. A movement of transfiguration, Vasks likens the ethereal tremolos and glissandi to leaves drifting freely from a tree. These prepare the ground for the appearance of Beethoven's Song of Thanksgiving from his A minor Opus 132 string quartet, which was written after Beethoven's recovery from a grave illness. It appears 4 times, framed by music of luminous stillness. The quartet says that if you know Pēteris Vasks, this movement feels inseparable from Vasks himself, his life story, his deep spirituality, and his immense love for Beethoven. The work ends not with resolution, but with quiet ascent, sound dissolving into silence. The movement starts with a very quiet, insect-like tremolo effect produced by the bows. They dissolve as the melody slowly takes root by around the 1 minute and 10-second mark. Then we hear Beethoven's calming Heiliger Dankgesang material. And that unfolds slowly. Now, if you know the Beethoven work, you'll recognize a lot of that sound right away. There are some quieter passages with Vasks' signature on them, but the Beethoven material keeps returning. You can hear some of Vasks' signature downward glissandos appearing toward the end of the movement as Beethoven's heavenly harmony heads higher, reaching an end in the stratosphere. At the very end, the cello spirals upward to join it, ending the work. Osvaldo Golijov is a pretty intriguing composer. His works are harmonically relatively simple, but always come across with a lot of passion, and that's certainly the case with the work recorded here by him, The Dreams and Prayers of Isaac the Blind. The klezmer-inspired sections of the work come across especially vividly, and I believe that's due to the presence of Chen Halevi on clarinet, who stamps his charismatic style on the performance. The Arethusa Quartet are equally idiomatic here, producing a performance of this work that gets right to its roots. I can't imagine it being performed more sympathetically than it is here. Pēteris Vasks' string quartet has a deep spirituality to it, some of that radiating from the use of Beethoven's heavenly Heiliger Dankgesang, but mostly due to Vasks' conception of the work. The Arethusa also have the measure of this work, and its depth comes through in the performance. Despite some impassioned passages, it ultimately comes across as a calming work, especially at the end. It's a great program of highly listenable contemporary works that also contain a lot of feeling and deep emotion to them, and deep spirituality as well. And I'd encourage listeners to hear this. These are 2 composers worth knowing about, and the performances are extremely sympathetic.
I found the Golijov very enjoyable. The tonal blend of Halevi's clarinet with the strings was really fine, and the clarinet writing covers such a wide range. I really thought I was listening to a bass clarinet for a moment in the first movement.
Yeah, me too.
It covers a lot of ground musically and emotionally as well. There are Middle Eastern modal influences, dance rhythms, and also moments of serenity. It's really a compelling work. The Vasks String Quartet No. 6 is a really great work, and I enjoyed this performance as well. The first and last movements are serene. The start of the final movement will have you leaning in off the chair, trying to pull the sound closer to you. The second movement, Allegro Appassionato, has intense and passionate moments, as well as more lyrical sections, and the performance by the Arethusa Quartet captured the emotional range in an impressive way. It's a very satisfying recording with contrasts, but somehow it all holds together nicely.
Yeah, we're big fans of Vasks' music on this podcast. We'd like to encourage listeners to check out all of his music, really. Yeah,
there's something about it that's really immediately approachable and understandable, even if you're not comfortable with modern classical music. I think you can appreciate it right away.
Yeah, and it's got a deep spirituality to it, too, something I think the world is desperately in need of these days. Yeah, it's a bit more impassioned than, say, the music of Arvo Pärt. I kind of think about what they said about Mahler and Bruckner, like Bruckner is already in heaven and Mahler's trying to get there. I kind of feel that Arvo Pärt's already in heaven and, Vasks is trying to get there. They're kind of like the modern equivalent of those two. Yeah.
All right, well, let's go over to a little bit of jazz heaven for this episode now. And we're going to start out with a bass-led recording, Simón Osuna's Too Soon, Too Late, on the Fresh Sound Records label. This came out May 14th. Bassist Simón Osuna is from a small town north of Barcelona in Spain. He started studying music on his own, getting his formal education with both a bachelor's and master's degree at the Conservatory of Amsterdam. He also spent time in New York studying with bassists Buster Williams, Reggie Workman, and David Wong, who wrote the recording notes for this album. He's performed with a lot of big names like Dee Dee Bridgewater, Philip Harper, and Steve Cardenas. And this is his recording debut. As to the title, from Wong's album notes, Simón explains the genesis of naming the album Too Soon, Too Late. It was a phrase uttered by a dear friend and roommate while we were brushing our teeth one night. He explained to me that he had fallen in love with a girl, but they couldn't be together because he was leaving the country soon. It is another expression describing the concept of star-crossed lovers.
Like Romeo and Juliet.
Too soon, too late.
Yeah.
So the lineup here, Simón Osuna on the bass, Grant Stewart on sax, Juan Fort on guitar, who's also from Catalonia, and he lived in Amsterdam and moved to New York City together with Osuna, playing together a lot. Now, we heard both Stewart and Fort on Fort's Hangin' In recording back in March in episode 251, Hangin' In After Dark, and David Wong was on bass there too.
Yeah, I'm really going to have to get that album at some point.
Yeah, it's a really good one. And Tommaso Perazzo on the piano. I remembered his name. We heard him way back in episode 74, Italian Explosion.
Wow.
On trumpeter Cesare Mecca's Shiny Hearts and Dusty Souls. And that was way back in August of 2022.
Yeah, I think that episode features a tarantella followed by an explosion.
It does.
Seem to recall that we put on there.
We've got to use that again sometime.
That's got to come back. Italian Explosion, too. Let's go.
And I remember that week because we went to the beer garden in the hot summer that week when we were talking about that. So
okay,
we'll have to do that again this year.
Yeah.
And we've also got Willie Bowman on the drums, who we've heard before on trumpeter David Snyder's debut recording, Introducing, back in episode 234, Found Objects and Fresh Air. And we're going to hear all of these musicians in combinations from trio, quartet, to full quintet throughout the recording. This was recorded at Pinch Recording in Long Island City, New York, December 6, 2024, engineered by Scott Lindner, mixed by Udo Panikiet, and mastered by Sander van der Heide. It's produced by Simón Osuna and executive producer Jordi Pujol. The recording gets started with the title track, Too Soon, Too Late, an Osuna original. The 8-measure intro has some neat syncopated bass and left-hand piano figures. Jumpy syncopation will add excitement under the melody phrases, switching up to Osuna's walking bass midway through the A sections of the tune, which is in an AABA shape with 16-measure A sections and an 8-measure B. Stewart and Fort lock together in unison on the melody. Let's hear this recording get started. Stewart is out of the break into a solo, swinging with a lot of fun ideas. Fort follows, clear-toned with snappy phrases, and Parazzo gets a piano solo too, with bluesy phrases and neat two-hand ideas. Bowman gets a drum solo punctuated by bass and piano. Let's hear some of Parazzo's playing into the drum solo on this one. To the melody from the B section there, and we're left in suspense with no bass solo yet. Track 2, In Walked Ray by bassist Sam Jones. This is from his recording The Chant, Sam Jones Plus 10 from 1961. The 10 including a lot of great players like Blue Mitchell on trumpet and the Adderley Brothers. Just a piano trio format here and a feature for the bass. Parazzo has some fun piano on the 4-measure intro, and then it's all Osuna taking the 32-measure AABA minor tune, and then Parazzo makes a tension-building transition section into Osuna's bass solo. Let's check this out. Now I know what you're all saying. More bass. So let's listen to some more of his solo on this tune. Really like his rhythmic feel and overall sense of style. Parazzo's up next with a bluesy swinging piano solo, and Bowman gets some drum solo time too before they take it through the melody once more. Track 3 is an Osuna original Skipper's Blues. Back to a quintet format for this one. Bowman gets it started on the drums. There's a bit of New Orleans sauce in the rhythm here. The 12-bar blues melody has fun, jumpy intervals handled in unison by Stewart and Fort, and Stewart is out of the break into a solo. It's got a really great bounce to it. On this one, let's hear Fort's guitar solo, mixing in chords and some outside phrases nicely. Parazzo has a piano solo with cool percussive chords. Stewart and Fort trade fours with Bowman before getting back to the melody to wrap things up. Track 4 is another Osuna original in undertone. Back to a trio format for this one. Osuna handles the 32-measure melody, nicely punctuated by Parazzo before he's off on a piano solo over a chugging walk from Osuna. Nice medium swing tempo there. Let's check out Osuna's melodic bass solo on this one. And Parazzo does some trading with Bowman before Osuna's back with the melody. Track 5, The Lamp is Low, a tune by Bert Schefter, Mitchell Parrish, and Peter DeRose, but it's really a recomposition of one of Ravel's most famous themes. This was first recorded by Mildred Bailey in 1939. This one is a quartet with Stewart's sax taking the melody. They take it at a fast clip, things getting started with an opening from Bowman. Yeah, and Stewart's really cooking with gas on this one, so let's just keep on listening to the rest of his solo here. Palazzo's ready for high gear here with his solo, working some speedy lines into the high register, and Osuna keeps his lines walking for a short solo before some trading with Bowman from sax and piano and a final run through the melody. Track 6, Henry Nemo's 'Tis Autumn, a jazz standard. It goes back to 1941 and was recorded multiple times in that year by Les Brown, Woody Herman, and Bunny Berrigan. A trio format for this one, and Osuna gets it started on the melody solo. Let's check it out. Rest of the trio coming in there, and Palazzo shows off a really classy touch on this one. Let's hear some of his playing. Passing the solo baton to Osuna from there, who really shapes melodic phrases nicely, and Palazzo gets the final melody ending over bowed bass from Osuna. And the recording finishes up with Poor Butterfly, a tune written by Raymond Hubble with lyrics originally by John Golden. This was inspired by Puccini's Madame Butterfly, a tune that goes all the way back to 1916, first recorded by Elizabeth Spencer. And the recording finishes up as a chordless sax trio. Osuna gets things going with an 8-measure intro, and Stewart enters on the melody, Bowman joining in subtly. Let's hear it get started into the first half of the 32-measure melody. It's really just loping along easily there. After the melody, Stewart continues on into a solo, so let's hear a little bit more of his playing on this final tune. Osuna has a solo too before a final time around the melody and a little cadenza from Stewart to wrap up the recording. At just 38 minutes, Simón Osuna's debut recording finishes a little too soon and leaves us wanting more, but that's okay because we'll be looking forward to his next one. Osuna shows his compositional skills, contributing 3 originals to the 7-song program that also includes 3 classic standards and 1 from Sam Jones. Osuna has ample space to show that he's a versatile and solid bassist who can drive rhythms, solo melodically, and get songs going in interesting ways. The varying instrumentation provides him with different settings to work in, from a cordless sax trio, quartet with sax, and a full quintet with sax and guitar. Grant Stewart's sax playing is masterful as usual, working melodies alone and with Juan Fort, and his solos have great phrasing and endless ideas. Fort is just on 2 tracks here, but shows the same style, tone, and skill we enjoyed on his own recording recently. And Tommaso Parazzo adds a lot of classy piano playing with hints to the past masters. His solos will have you smiling. And finally, Willie Bowman's drumming is creative and tasteful, with some solo spots and exciting ideas on exchanges. I hope Simón Osuna makes his next recording sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I wonder if he has some extra tracks in the can there, because this was a pretty short album. I wanted it to go on too. But let's hear it also for Osuna and his extended bass solo on In Walked Ray.
Yeah.
Wow. I've never heard a bass player with so many ideas on a single track. He's got a great bass sound too, full and thick sounding, kind of plush, something you can sink into.
Yeah.
And of course, he's well recorded here. He's also surprisingly lyrical on the instrument, playing the lead on 'Tis Autumn sensitively and appealingly. Now, Tommaso Parazzo brings some classy piano jazz. I used your same word, Russ. And I especially liked him on the track In Undertone. Grant Stewart on tenor sax really shined with his floating sound on Poor Butterfly over the minimal accompaniment of bass and very light drums. Each track on the short album has one of the soloists offering something that you really want to hold on to once you've finished listening. And Simón Osuna winds up being the star of the show, surprising as that may seem for a bassist. It's a really enjoyable album, with solid playing and some magical turns in the soloing here and there. Warm recorded sound too, and that really makes the bass hit home.
Yeah, an interesting debut recording, and like I say, I'm eager to hear some more from him. All right, next let's go over to New Jersey.
Yeah, I've been to New Jersey.
Your brother's there now, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah.
We've got trumpeter Ted Chubbs live at the Statuary on Circle 9 Records. This came out May 15th. Born in Ashtabula, Ohio, Chubb began performing professionally while studying at Ohio State University in the late 1990s. He moved to New Jersey in 2003 to study trumpet with William B. Fielder. His previous recording from 2017 is Gratified, Never Satisfied, and many of the compositions on this new recording were written while Chubb lived in Switzerland from 2015 to 2018. 6 of his originals are featured here, and the Circle 9 page for the album has some insight into them that I'll refer to. About the venue here, the building began in 1907 as the Jersey Statuary Company, the working studio of sculptor and painter Gino De Sanctis. In 2007, musician Walter Parks and producer Margot Parks transformed it into a live, work, present art space. It's a completely brick structure that gives a resonant acoustic presence, and the notes say that the audience sits only a few feet from the musicians, creating a direct shared listening experience inside the room and allowing the exchange between performers and listeners to become part of the music itself. Chubb and his wife, Rachel Rill, purchased the property in 2020, completed renovations the following year, and reopened concerts to the public in 2021. Since then, the venue has presented more than 50 concerts and community events. So the lineup on the recording here: Ted Chubb on the trumpet, Bruce Williams on alto sax, Oscar Perez on piano and Fender Rhodes, Tom DiCarlo on bass, and Jerome Jennings on the drums. This was recorded March 15th through 18th, 2025 at the Statuary in Jersey City, New Jersey. Chief engineer and mixer Todd Whitelock, recording engineer, mastering engineer Chris Gold, assistant recording engineer Tiger Dieppe, and graphic design for the recording by Chad McCulloch, another one of our favorite trumpeters. Produced by Ted Chubb, executive producer, The Statuary. The recording opens up with one of Chubb's originals, SBB Bounce. The notes say that this one emerged during the years he spent traveling across Switzerland, riding trains from city to city, meeting musicians, and watching unfamiliar landscapes gradually become temporary homes. It's a happy-sounding tune in an AABA shape. The B is longer at 12 measures. It certainly has a bounce to it that seems to come from the way DiCarlo's bass locks in on the syncopated phrases on the A section with the horns and Jennings' popping drums. Chubb is up first for a solo, so let's hear things get started. He's just getting going there, and I'm hearing a lot of exciting ideas, so let's just keep listening. Enthusiastic crowd there, and Williams is next. I like his phrasing, posing questions to himself that he has to answer. And Oscar Perez has an exciting piano solo, and the horns do some trading with Jennings' drums before a final time through the melody. Track 2 is another Chubb original, Uptick. The notes say this one is dedicated to his father, with childhood memories of sailing together on Lake Erie and a renewed connection with sailing during the pandemic. Navigating shifting wind, water, and weather requires both knowledge and instinct, an experience he describes as remarkably similar to jazz, where improvisation ultimately depends on trusting the moment. DiCarlo gets this one going with a cool bass line, and Jennings and Perez contribute to a unique groove on the intro. Perez on Rhodes here with some fun funkiness. The melody is a catchy AABA 32-measure construction with harmonized horn lines. is up first for a playful Rhodes solo on this one. Here, let's check out Williams's solo into the start of Chubb's solo. After the trumpet solo, there's an interlude for Jennings to work up some drum excitement, and a final time through the melody leads to some enthusiastic exchanges between Chubb and Williams. Track 3 is another Chubb original, Little Flower Girl. The notes say this grew from a brief encounter with a young girl selling flowers on a street in Mumbai. When their eyes met, he saw the same innocence he recognizes in his nephews, the moment revealed in his words, beauty and joy and chaos and hardship all at the same time, leaving an emotional imprint that shaped the music. It's a cute and catchy melody. It's long at 56 measures. If you think of it in 8-measure phrases, it's kind of in an AA, BC, BCA pattern. Chubb and Williams trade off the first A sections. Let's hear it get started. Solo's first on this one, working a sense of bluesiness into his lines, and Chubb has a lot of speedy phrases and skillfully weaving lines in his solo on this one, with a sassy ending. Let's check out some of Perez's Rhodes solo on this one that has nice interplay with DeCarlo's bass. And when he gets to the end, he kind of quotes that melody phrase that every time I hear it reminds me a bit of Bobby McFerrin's Don't Worry, Be Happy. Oh. And the horns are back from the middle section of the melody to finish this one up. Track 4 is Harold Arlen and Johnny Mercer's Out of This World. This was first recorded in 1944 from the 1945 movie of the same name. When the character Herbie Fenton, played by Eddie Bracken, starts to sing, it's actually Bing Crosby's voice dubbed into the movie. Here they create a unique mood on the introduction with alternating piano chords and drum toms. And this is a unique Arlen tune with a long 72-measure melody, and it kind of creates a Dorian modal mood. Chubb starts the melody with harmonized lines from Williams, who takes the middle section of the tune over rippling lines from Perez. We won't get that far in a sample, but you'll be able to pick up the overall mood. Chubb's solo on this one has nice phrasing and mixes delicate and agile ideas. Let's check out some of it. Nice. Williams follows, working up to a restrained high cry in a passionate solo, and Perez rolls out some tremolos during his solo, which connects to the middle section of the melody picked up by Williams. There's a subtle intensity in the whole performance of this tune. Track 5 is another Chubb original, Expat, and the notes say this one reflects the disorientation of living inside another culture where ordinary tasks become difficult and social interactions unsettled, yet the experience ultimately deepens empathy and expands one's sense of common humanity.
Story of my life.
Mike and I know all about that. This one is in the post-bop modal vein with a melody that has fun interval jumps and syncopation. It's in an AAB shape with 16 measure sections. The final section builds up the rhythmic tension for Williams to launch into a solo, picking up on the melody riff to get started. Let's check it out. Sounds like he's got a fire started here, so let's keep on listening to some more of this solo. Chubb has an agile solo on this one too, with fun, varied articulation, and Perez's piano solo has a lot of rhythmic and percussive excitement. Jennings gets a drum solo too before they finish it up with a B section and a final slowed A section of the melody. Track 6, another Chubb original refugee hymn. The notes say this is written for people fleeing war, famine, crime, and poverty. It's a slow one, but with a lot of feeling. Chubb and Williams trade off phrases and harmonize on the 16-measure melody. Williams is up first for a solo, and Chubb follows with a solo with a great arc to its development, perfectly timed for a 1-minute sample. Thanks, Ted. Let's take a listen. Digs in and gets some bluesy nuggets in his solo on this one, and the horns are back for some simultaneous improvisation into melody lines to a slowed ending. Track 7, another Chubb original, 1919. The notes say this is dedicated to his grandparents, who were born a month apart, lived nearly 90 years, and died within a year of one another, and they remained married for more than 6 decades. The notes say it honors a lifelong partnership that sustained his path in music. It's a gentle and slow ballad in an AABA 32-measure shape. The horns trade off the first sections. At this tempo, we'll just be able to hear it get started. Chubb has a subtle solo over the A sections, and they return to the melody from the B with a long final note to end the tune. I'll leave you to check out the rest of this one on your own. Track 8 is Django, written by John Lewis, the pianist of the modern jazz quartet. It was recorded by them in 1954 and released as the title track of their 1956 album. a tribute to guitarist Django Reinhardt. Perez sets the mood with a piano intro for the 20-measure melody, taken slowly but dramatically with the help of Jennings's drum toms. Let's hear it. Almost classical in its nature and very dramatic, but things get moving over walking bass for the solos with Williams up first and then Chubb. They have transition horn lines between the solos. Let's check out Perez's fun piano solo on this one that gets some horn backing. And the ending melody section is in the same fashion as the opening. And the recording finishes up with a tune by saxophonist Bruce Williams, Empty Hearts. The notes say this is inspired by an ancient Sufi teaching that asks listeners to extend the same compassion toward human beings that they often show to animals, and to open the heart without distinction. This starts with a rubato spiritual vibe, with Chubb echoing Williams's lines. Let's check it out. It continues in rubato fashion, with more improvisation added in by the horns. Perez gets a solo section 2 that fades to nothing at the ending before the crowd shows their appreciation. It's hard to pick a spot to sample cleanly, so I'll leave you to hear this one in its full flow from start to finish. And that's the recording. Ted Chubb shows both his trumpet and composition skills on live at the Statuary. As an improviser, he's steeped in the post-bop tradition, but his lines are free from cliches and have a sense of fresh discovery, whether handling softer ballad material or speedier changes. He draws you into the structure of his solos. His original compositions here have catchy melodies and harmonies that lend themselves to fun and interesting soloing. The program is rounded out by 2 standards and a spiritual tune from Bruce Williams, whose sax playing also stands out on the recording, working harmonized melody lines with Chubb and blowing passionate solos. The rhythm section is excellent too, with great backing and solos from Oscar Perez on both piano and Rhodes, and Tom DeCarlo's bass and Jerome Jennings' drums, moving things from flowing rubato to hard swinging grooves. There's a natural quality and upfront character to the live recording here, with an appreciative audience that responds to what's happening. You can pick up on the closeness of the sound environment. It sounds like a great venue for live jazz, and that character adds to the impact of the fine music here.
Well, I imagine Rosanna Dana would say, "I didn't know you could hear such good jazz in New Jersey." This sounds like an enjoyable night out at the Statuary, which is located in New Jersey. The crowd certainly sound involved with the playing, always appreciative, and sometimes you can hear them commenting on the playing too, which I thought was pretty cool. They're kind of in the background, though. The focus is really on the musicians, and you hear them, the audience is never distracting on the recording. It's really a well-recorded album. And the playing on the album itself is really solid. Ted Chubb, Bruce Williams, and Oscar Perez all have different, contrasting musical personalities, and they're rather hard to describe how they're different. Chubb changes his approach in tone and is often melodic, whereas Williams can get wild and raw-toned, playing more figures than melodies, but of course both he and Chubb vary their solo approaches. Perez is bluesy at times and plays quick figures at others. Jerome Jennings is a hard-hitting drummer who solos with imposing presence. And bassist Tom DeCarlo doesn't step out, but keeps everything anchored. It's the playing of the individuals that drove this record for me, and I found it a good listen with great recorded quality for a live recording. The focus is really on the band, and as I said, the audience never becomes a distraction.
Yeah. I hope for their success with that venue, and I also hope that they record more groups there.
Yeah, sounds great. Let's put New Jersey on the jazz map.
And another great recording on Circle 9 Records. Now, we haven't done a Posi-Tone release in a while, so here we go for our last recording with the latest from trombonist Altin Sankalar with Natural Rhythm, and this came out on May 15th. Trombonist Altin Sankalar was born in California, raised in Texas, and now is based in New York, having both Mexican and Turkish heritage. He has a Bachelor of Music degree in music performance from the University of Texas at Austin and a Master of Music degree in music performance in jazz studies from Michigan State University, where he was once Michael Dease's teaching assistant, and he's had teaching positions at Michigan State University and Brevard Jazz Institute, among others. We've been following his recording career with his previous 3 Posi-Tone albums. In episode 120 back in 2023, we heard In Good Standing. And then in episode 159 in 2024, Discover the Present. And in episode 207 from last year's episode, Blues and Bones, we heard Unleashed. And Sankalar has great technique, an exciting style, and a sense of humor that comes through his playing. We're always ready to hear something new from him. And Altin follows us on Facebook too, so we hope that he checks out this episode.
Yeah, I want to mention I have all 3 of those other albums that he released that we talked about on CD. So
yeah, I have them too. Yeah, in my Posi-Tone collection. There's a great lineup here of a lot of players that we really enjoy. Altin Sankalar, our leader on trombone. Alex Norris on trumpet and flugelhorn. We've heard him as a leader and sideman many times. He's the trumpeter to call for great post-bop and Latin trumpet playing. Sherelle Cassidy on alto sax, soprano sax, and flute, who we've heard a few times before on the podcast. Michael Dease on baritone sax on 3 tracks. In a recent post on Facebook, I saw Dease with a French horn. Pretty soon there won't be any instruments left that he doesn't play better than almost everyone else. Art Hirahara on the piano, Boris Kozlov on bass, Gary Kirkozo on drums on this one, and extra percussion from Alex Acuna. As always, on Posi-Tone Recordings, Mark Free is the producer and Nick O'Toole the engineer. This was recorded September 12th, 2025 at Acoustic Recording in Brooklyn, New York, mixed and mastered at Woodland Studio, Lake Oswego, Oregon. The program here is mostly Cinq-Allard originals with 3 covers of tunes by jazz greats. And we'll start out with one by Wayne Shorter, One by One. This is the opening track from the 1963 Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers Ugetsu album, with the horn section of Wayne Shorter, Freddie Hubbard, and Curtis Fuller on trombone, recorded live at Birdland. This one has an AABA 32-measure melody. The horn arrangement is a lot of fun, with Cassidy getting things started solo. Latin percussion from Acuna and the other horn lines mix in, and you can tell this is going to be a fun recording right from the start. Transition section there builds up the tension into a solo from Cinq-Allard, so let's keep on listening. Great agility. I love that low plopped note that came in there on the way. Cassidy follows with speedy but relaxed lines, and Hirohata chimes out chords and trickles appealing lines in a charming style. The trilly transition section leads into more horn arrangement with new surprises before the final melody with a little stretched ending. Track 2 is a Cinq-Allard original, Reflection. This one is really charming, with Cinq-Allard on lyrical high phrases with harmonized horn lines around him. The stop and start quality of the melody is teasing. There's a 4-measure intro and a 28-measure main melody section. Let's hear it get started. Hirohata is up first for a gently flowing solo. Let's check out Norris's trumpet solo on this one. Always great trumpet solos from Alex Norris. Cencalar follows with a buttery smooth solo that still has a lot of agile slide work, and he connects back to a final run through the intro and melody and a coda ending with some final trombone thoughts. Track 3 is In Walked Horace, a tune from J.J. Johnson, and this is from Johnson's 1960 recording J.J. Inc., that's as in incorporated. Bring in Michael Deese on Barry sax and some Caribbean feel for this 32-measure AABA melody. The horn interplay on the arrangement will make you smile, and Cencalar is up first for a solo. Deese follows Cencalar, and then they do some fun trading, so let's check out some of their interaction. Some new composed horn lines into percussion before a final run through the melody. It's all good fun. Track 4, John Coltrane's Resolution, Part 2 of A Love Supreme, recorded in 1964. This opens with rubato interaction between Cencalar and Hirahara. Let's hear as much of it as we can in 1 minute. Now, hearing this famous progression get injected with Latin rhythms is something else. Cencalar works improvisations into Coltrane's original melody, and then there's some piano from Hirahara over energetic percussion. Let's hear that transition. more trombone improvisations, and a final melody phrase take it to the end. And by the way, we'll be hearing this work again next week in another new interesting context, but more on that later. Track 5 is a Cinquelar original, Baila de Plena. Make sure that you've done your stretches and warm up and put on your athletic clothing before even listening to this, not to mention trying to play it. Cinquelar gets it going with a catchy rising and falling riff that gets joined by Hirahara. Then it's picked up by Kozlov here on electric bass, which I always enjoy hearing him on. Trumpet and sax lines layer in, including Dis on bari sax. It comes to a break just before a minute with a pulling back of the forward motion, but not for long. And the riff is back soon in the bass, in a section leading to a solo from Cassidy, so let's check out some of her playing on this one. Cinquelar follows with an exciting solo, hitting low blast bombs near the end, and Kozlov really grooves with the percussion underneath. Hirahara has a percussive solo too on this one before the final melody section. Track 6, another Cinquelar original, Descarga de Dia. And speaking of electric bass, Kozlov gets things going on this one, and he's joined by Hirahara and drums and percussion. Horn lines ending in fun shakes work to a flute solo from Cassidy. Let's check it out. Yeah, let's keep on listening to some of this cool flute solo from Cassidy. exciting exchanges between Norris and Senkalar follow, challenging each other with tricky weaving melodic ideas, and there's more to come with a percussion section over the grooving bass, leading to an expansive solo from Hirahara and a return of the shaking horn lines that build to the end. Track 7, another Senkalar original, New Life. This one is a ballad in an AABA shape with pickup phrases from Senkalar. Nothing makes that kind of lonesome sound quite like the trombone working up in the higher register. The arrangement here is fine, with Cassidy's flute working with Norris's flugelhorn. Senkalar has some cascading phrases on the B section here and carries on for a solo after the melody. He leaves space and floats out phrases, sometimes softly and sometimes with more urgency. And Kozlov gets an acoustic bass solo on this one, so let's check that out. From the B section, with Norris getting a little spot in place of Senkalar this time. It works to a series of holds and a cool cadenza from Senkalar before the final note that you'll have to check out on your own. Track 8, another Senkalar original, Lament. This one starts with a rising and falling piano and bass line opening, and then just Senkalar and Dis are featured on a harmonized melody that keeps evolving over 76 measures. After the melody, Senkalar solos first, with lots of fun slide trickery and rhythmic licks. Dis follows, and then Hirahara, and we haven't sampled one of his piano solos yet, so let's check out this one that has a really nice arc to its structure. back to the melody from there that ends in improvised exchanges. Track 9 is another Cinq-Allard original, Runaway, something new and appealing for this one that Cassidy gets to start out on soprano sax, joined by Kozlov. The arrangement is fun, with Norris getting some standout lines above the sax and trombone. Cinq-Allard and Cassidy trade off phrases on this one, working into simultaneous improvisations. Hirahara has a solo that really digs in as well. I'll leave you to check out the solos on this one on your own. And the recording ends up with a final Cinq-Allard original settling. This one is rhythmically mesmerizing from the opening bass lines of Kozlov. Seductive horn lines rise and fall to a hypnotic sax riff in the melody by Cassidy, back on alto sax here. Is off on a playful and weaving solo first, followed by Cassidy. Things switch up to a swing over walking bass for Cinq-Allard's solo, so for our final sample, let's hear one more from him on this last tune. Carcosa gets a short drum solo with flashy stick work before they get back to the melody to finish things up. Natural Rhythm is a tour de force in Latin rhythms and exciting music, mostly in the form of Altin Cinq-Allard's original compositions, but also including inventive arrangements of one tune each from Wayne Shorter, J.J. Johnson, and John Coltrane. The arrangements are appealing, making use of varying combinations of the great horn lineup with Alex Norris on trumpet, Sherelle Cassidy on alto and soprano saxes and flute on 2 tunes, and Michael Deese on bari sax on 3 tunes. Softer moments in track 7, New Life, balance out the rest of the energetic rhythmic mood. Cinq-Allard sounds at the top of his game with technically impressive and creative solos throughout, always with a good sense of fun, and the other horns all get spots to shine. Art Hirahara sounds great, whether backing the others or letting loose on solos. Latin grooves always seem to inspire him. Kozlov is great too on both acoustic and electric basses, locking in with Gary Kirkazow's drums and Alex Acuña's percussion that really gives the recording a special character with sometimes subtle and often exciting Latin grooves. So stop scrolling through your social media algorithms and start grooving to Altin Senkelar's natural rhythms.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Just shut off that social media and listen to this. I really think it's the Latin rhythms that draw me to these albums of his, because I like hearing those in jazz a lot. And he's got them here again, too. That from that first track, I was really pulled in. This album is full of lively Latin rhythms that propel the music, courtesy of Gary Kirkazu, along with percussionist Alex Acuña. The album also features some of our favorite jazz musicians, as you said, and that's probably why I'm always drawn to Senkelar's albums. He gets great playing from all of them, plus the Latin rhythms. And he gets particularly good playing on this album from alto sax player Cheryl Cassidy. And I also liked Alex Norris's classy trumpet, especially on Reflection and Descarga de Dia. Yeah, nothing not to like here. It's never more of the same with Altin Senkelar, though. It's always kind of a new album and always full of fun, too. He's got a good sense of humor, and I like hearing that as well. So we do have more of the same great playing, though, but the album is always fresh, and this one is, too. I liked it a lot. Probably going to have to get this one, too, when I can afford it, when the end finally is worth something.
Yeah, I thought all of the composed music here really had a sense of fun, and all the melodies were catchy in their own way. So I'll be listening to this a lot.
Yeah, just the first track really had me going right away. I really liked it a lot. Good energy. Yeah. A good uplifting feel to it.
Another great recording on Posi-Tone. All right, that's going to do it for episode 260. As always, we want to thank Fast Signs of Staten Island for our glowing neon logo. And we've got a program lined up for episode 261. So what's on the classical side, Mike?
Well, I've got a pretty interesting lineup for next week that has got me really curious. The first album is from the Renaissance era. Well, the recording isn't from the Renaissance era. The music is. The recording was made last year or earlier this year or something. Anyway, it's Troubled Times Music. What a great title for an album we're going to hear here in May 2026. Anyway, Troubled Times, Music and Espionage in Renaissance England. So we're going to English composers here. This is by the Queen's Six. That would be the vocal ensemble, and the Rose Consort of Viols would be accompanying them on some tracks, not all. And this is on the Signum label, released on May 22nd. One of our favorite harpsichordists, Justin Taylor, maybe our favorite harpsichordist, although I like Francesco Corti too. Okay, so I can't really decide. Anyway, this is an album called Clavecin Vent, I guess, which would mean 20, or standing for the 20th century. And what it is concertos for the harpsichord that were written in the 20th century.
That's interesting. Yeah,
that's really interesting. It's a great program. And if you know your 20th century harpsichord works, Manuel de Falla should come to mind right away. And also Henryk Gorecki did a famous one. But there's also one by Jean Francais, a composer who writes lighter music, or who wrote lighter music that I really happen to like. So I'm really curious to hear this one too. All right, now our third album, our contemporary album, is by trumpeter Matthias Höfs, German trumpeter. This is two works. One is by the pianist and composer Fazıl Say. He's Turkish, and he's really famous as a pianist, but he's a composer now too. Wolf Kerschek, a German composer. These are double concertos for trumpet and another instrument. In Say's case, it's going to be the organ, trumpet and organ, which are paired together more often than you'd think. I really don't know why. Maybe it's because they're both played in church,
right?
You know, Kershak has Höfs playing with his son, trumpet and French horn. So that should be interesting.
Yeah, sounds like an
those
interesting
are my albums
program
for next week. Yeah.
All right, on the jazz half, we're just going to listen to Miles, Bird, and Coltrane.
Oh
no, really? Actually, this program kind of just chose itself because it all fit together with interesting reworkings of the music of Miles Davis by the Giovanni Falzone Libera Band. And this is called Suite for Miles. It's on Tuk Music. Then we're going to go check out drummer Richard Barata's Another Kind of Bird, reimagining Charlie Parker. Now, we've listened to his previous two recordings. In 2023, we heard Off the Charts which was sort of his favorite compositions by jazz musicians that didn't get enough attention. And then we heard Looking Back last year, which was sort of 60s rock tunes. And now we'll hear his take on the music of Charlie Parker. And then for something completely different,
the pièce de résistance,
the harmonica wonder Matthias Heise and the Danish Radio Big Band with A Love Supreme Revisited, a reworked John Coltrane classic for harmonica and big band. So I was listening to that last night. This will expand your mind.
Yeah, let's say that again. This is going to be A Love Supreme with the harmonica as the lead instrument.
Right.
All right.
With big band.
Okay. I'll make sure I have some beer for that one.
And miraculously, all of these recordings were just released on Friday, yesterday. So
wow.
There you go. Had to put them all together.
Right.
We'll have all of these recordings for the classical program and jazz program up together on our Deezer playlist a few hours after this episode is published. I'll put a link to it from our Facebook page as well if you want to get started listening with Mike and I during the week. And we'll be back again next week with our new episode. So any final thoughts for this week, Mike?
Well, I had something, but then you said the thing about A Love Supreme on the harmonica, and it's all gone now. So that's all I'm thinking about. Those are my last thoughts for this week.
All right. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. We'll all be in a spiritual mood.
How spiritual can the harmonica go is the question.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll find out. So we'll see you again next week for episode 261. So until then, keep listening, and we'll see you again next time.